Welcome to AI in Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design. I'm Dan Saffer, and my co host Nick Martellero, who's off this week. We are faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human Computer Interaction Institute, the HCII. Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right at the intersection of these fields. Whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner interested in design, we're glad you're here. This week, live from Config 2026, I talk with 6 industry leaders about what they saw, what the vibe was, and what the big themes were from this year's big design conference in San Francisco last week. Stick around for a lot of varying opinions and hot takes from Config 2026. We are here at Config 2026. I'm here with Peter Merholz and James Garrett. We just saw the keynote about an hour ago. So, gentlemen, first impressions?
Bit of a dog's breakfast, right? Kind of a grab bag of things that they showed. There wasn't like a strong overarching theme in the way that I think there had been in prior years. Also, it looked to me like they are really going after marketing, communication, brand design more. They talked about shaders for 15 minutes. They spent a lot on motion graphics and motion design because they are launching that capability. It just felt like they were playing that up more than design for product and user experience.
Well, I think it's important to remember that they are still going after Adobe, right? I mean, Adobe is the incumbent suite in so many enterprises still. And if you're going to go after Adobe, you've got to hit Adobe's major use cases. And those audiences, those markets are huge.
Yep.
Only a third of the time seem to be what I would consider the major competitor, which would be other things like Claude Design that are going straight
Right.
at them. But I think you're right. You forget that outside of UX, there is a huge market of people that are marketers and illustrators and animators and all those kinds of
Yeah.
things. And Adobe has a lock on them. If they can break away some of those, it could be a strategy for them.
Open up their own market.
Yes,
right, Beyond
exactly.
the audiences they're already
Well, right. If you've already got your design system in Figma, right, can you then
extend.
capitalize on that? Exactly.
All that being said, I was still surprised at skills. We're going to talk about that for like 15 seconds.
I don't remember them even saying the word, but I might just not have been paying attention.
It was at the very end where Dylan was like, "Hey, oh yeah, we have skills too. They're really cool. You'll like them." And it's like, wait,
Yeah, I was like,
can we talk more about that and
Yeah.
less about
yeah.
the shaders? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. I just feel like I feel the stuff that was really interesting, at least to me, was the stuff that's like it's like not ready yet. Like all this stuff, like the code layers, I think was the thing. I'm like, oh well, that's going to be a big bulwark for them if it makes things easy to move between the canvas and code. That feels to me like a powerful story that they can tell, but it seems like that was not the story that they were interested in telling.
Yeah, and they showed Weave basically bringing node-based creation to product or to design, which if you're familiar with 3D tools and the tools that people in movie making use, right, you tend to use these node-based tools. And I think that's super interesting. That should provide an opportunity for emergence and swapping things out and just flexibility that we haven't seen in digital product design. But again, it just was like, here's a thing, here's a product, it'll be ready soon. There was no story. There was no overarching theme. It just felt like, here's a set of things we've been working on this past year that we are communicating today.
It's an interesting concept, but it seems like a gimmick.
To Peter's point, if there's a constituency out there for whom this is a comfortable and familiar way to do their work, this might be a way to bring them into the fold, and to give them some familiar hooks and get them into the ecosystem as well.
I'm also interested in just other paradigms, right? It's in trying to introduce, I think, a new paradigm potentially for product and UX design in terms of how do you assemble the assets and logic in a way that, yeah, it's just a different mode for building, see where that leads. And if that's an appropriate paradigm for this type of work.
I think that kind of paradigm shift is the pattern that I'm seeing, if to the extent that there is a pattern there, is that they are actively trying to change the way that people think about their tool and how it is used. Maybe not all of the paradigms fit together, and maybe not all of them make sense from my vantage point, but bringing it back to the focus of your podcast, looking at it through the lens of the work that I'm doing in AI transformation, what I see is that like everybody is very curious about what the new workspace is going to look like. And as AI work shifts from one person with a prompt to a team clustered around a canvas, Figma sees an opportunity for the canvas to become that new workspace, not just where the visual work happens, but also where the code work happens. That's what the code layers piece is all about.
And I think with Weave too, you get a visual, right? The reason you have that interface paradigm is so that non-coders can do some code-like things with branching and it's
Logic.
conditionals and
Yeah.
logic in a visual way that you're hooking things up. I was talking to someone else here how their design team is just embracing Claude CLI now. But I think a lot of designers, and maybe not just designers, would still like a visual mode for building as opposed to continuing to work in the terminal.
I think that was part of the story here and what they were trying to lean into. Like, oh, well, you can do this on the canvas. You can do this on the canvas. You can do this
Yeah.
on the, and the collaboration aspect, which is what they basically built the entire company around,
Exactly. Yeah.
was interesting. I was also like, wow, do I want to scroll through other people's AI chats about certain things? I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. I need a filter on that. Be able to collapse some of those conversations.
I mean, I guess on that front, we're all still figuring this shit out, man. Like no
Yeah.
one knows. No one knows.
Well, one of the things they announced was all about being able to make your own plugins.
Right.
And I'm like, isn't that a skill? Like, can I now just make a skill that I could do? And that's basically a plugin? Or is it that the plugins have different sliders and stuff that I can really manipulate at that level?
Yeah, I don't know enough about how they've executed it technically yet, but my sense is that a plugin is going to afford you kind of richer access to Figma's plumbing to be able to do more sophisticated things that hopefully would be less error prone than using your Claude sidecar to get the job done.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that the plugins actually still get you is that direct manipulation.
Yeah.
Like, so you can still be tweaking it without having to type, or, no, not like that, a little bit more like this. So, which I'm a big fan of.
Never get away from Windows icons, menus, and pointers.
I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on that.
I mean, we
I do
spent
think-
a
yeah.
long time developing that.
It works, and it works for a reason.
Right.
I do think this is another example of people embracing AI as a means of giving people the power to create their own tools for their own needs. And AI-powered custom tooling is a trend that we're seeing broadly across design organizations as people are spinning up these little one-off things to do one little job for them that gets the job done.
And you could see something like Weave, extending that with workflow visualization with assets, with plugins, which are these custom tools, right? Maybe that's part of the vision is theoretically you could do it all here on this one canvas. It would be good if they had communicated that. I don't know. I don't know if that's
They're
they're
kind
not
of
telling us
messages.
what
Yeah,
they
that's true.
see as the future. And maybe they're just hesitant to stake those claims.
Right. Because when they did stake those claims 2 years ago, it didn't really pan out.
They're placing a range of bets.
Yeah,
They're trying to see which of these things catches fire out there,
Mhm.
and then they'll reinvest accordingly. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for chatting with us here on the AI and Design podcast.
Our pleasure.
I'm Greg Petroff. I don't know how to explain who I am these days, but I guess I would say fractional designer, part-time retiree.
So you just came from a session downstairs that was a deep dive into some of the stuff that they showed in the keynote.
Yeah.
Any surprises?
I think the thing that I liked about where Figma's going, and I think what Dylan talked a little bit, although I don't think he did a good job of explaining it this morning, is there's an opportunity for people who have a design background and understand how to make things to actually be more strategically important because they can do the whole thing now. And I've been working with some small teams recently where we're trying to do this whole thing around a code first model where the design and code are kind of connected to each other. And it's complicated at times, but the easier it gets, the more empowered the designer is in the product organization because they can make faster than product can think about products. And so I think it shows a story that creative have an opportunity to be more strategic in organizations. And if Figma kind of pivots into that, then I think they'll be okay. Last year, they talked a lot about product management and trying to help them. Design community was a little bit flummoxed by that.
Right.
I understood why they were trying to do that, but I think their only viable path forward with all the new tools that are happening is to be a place where people can explore and make and think, and then it magically becomes product. And it's easier said than done. But what I saw today in the keynote and what we did the deep dive today showed a lot more about how the decisions a designer might make can be manifested in a production ready code. And that's a really cool thing.
Did they demo more the code layer?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that I'm the most interested in.
Yeah.
Is like, what were the kind of details that they had there? Or was it just like, hey, here's more about how this works?
I would have liked them to actually open a CLI and look
Yeah.
at the code that it was generated. They did not do that. I think
They
there's probably
didn't.
a reason why, because they're probably not
They
baked
also did not
100%.
do that in the keynote either.
That's right. But they showed iteration, which I thought was pretty cool, like taking something that was sort of baked, right, and had code, and then saying, I don't really like this. It's not working for me. I'm going to fork it. So they forked the code base. They showed the code base being forked in GitHub. Then they showed them taking it statically into Figma, doing some hand carving on it, going back, putting it back in the code base. Then they showed the AI agent doing some iterations with them, adding some animation, doing some work, showed that going back into the code base. So they did show the ability for the connection between a code base and the design tool working, but I don't think they focused as much on like, here's the actual React code sitting inside of your favorite dev tool.
Right.
But it was really interesting. The other thing that they showed is they showed a bunch of AI iterations where they asked really simple questions. And they're like, hey, I'm curious if I add this effect to this, what would it look like? And so it was really a little bit like a baking show because some of the transforms took a little while, right?
Uh-huh.
So they would do that and then move on to showing you something else and then come back.
Go back here.
Here.
Yeah,
And then a couple times they're like, oh, it's not done yet. Here's my pre-baked cupcake
Right.
for you to take a look at it.
At least it was a working demo. It wasn't.
It was a working
hand-wavy.
demo. It wasn't hand wavy. Yeah, that's right. And so I think if they can lean into that, I think that's their salvation.
Yeah.
Because if they don't, we're just going to see people working in Claude Design or other tools that are just in the code.
Right. Exactly. And that was my thing viewing the keynote was I was like, oh, this feels like it was tilted a lot more towards brand marketing motion and less about the kind of code design, which I see as being their biggest competitor right now.
That's right. That's their Achilles heel for production companies. And I also saw they're definitely going after Adobe's space. The motion graphics is After Effects,
Yeah, I mean, some of the Photoshop-y kind of stuff.
yeah, exactly. The imaging stuff, the creative tools.
So it's an interesting strategy that they're still trying to eat away at Adobe, even as Anthropic is trying to eat away at them.
I'm helping a startup right now, and we vibe coded an entire new experience. We use Figma Make for part of it. We use Claude for part of it. And the reality is that there's still fine tuning that you might need to do, and a drawing tool is helpful. The challenge is that Claude Design just added that, right? So the fact that you can actually change vectors and move stuff now, it's sort of like, if you're in product design, that might be game over for them for some team.
The thing that they seem to be leaning super heavily into is the canvas.
Yeah.
which is great. I mean, Figma owns that
Yeah.
space. And what they're trying to claw their way into, no pun intended, is to get into that coding space. And meanwhile, it feels like Claude and Google are trying to get into the Canvas space and working that direction.
Sure. And I do think the one thing that changes my mind a little bit about their position that might help them is I think the role of product and design are merging. And I've been talking about this with a lot of people lately where my thinking is, who does AI support better now? Right. So lots of product leaders use AI to write PRDs and requirements documents, et cetera. But those are templated documents that can be trained and taught to a designer. So a designer can write a PRD now pretty fast.
Right.
Product person who has really strong discernment about what a great looking product is and how it should work is a little harder. And they don't necessarily know how to ask with prompting language the right questions to get actually good outcomes. They can vibe code and they can make something that looks pixel accurate, but is it great? There's a good question there. I don't know.
Right.
And so in my mind, like, who benefits more from the tooling right now? Actually, I think designers do, because we can start to doing their jobs if we're willing to do it. So we have to lean in and become more willing to own that space.
Yeah.
Be more strategic. And I personally think that designers can make faster than product people can think. So we make to think, they think to make. And, the idea of a requirements document with features to me just seems like an artifact of a really broken process.
Process has been broken for a very long time.
So don't do that, right? So build product teams that have people who are switch hitters. Let product vibe code, let design write PRDs, focus people on converging those skills. And if I were a young designer right now, I would be focusing my attention and energy on the structure, business problems, and design skills. The coding part, you're going to get help and assistance along the way. And, the backend infrastructure, you don't need to know. There'll be engineers who can support you on that. The full stack stuff, that doesn't go away. And there are going to be systems that do some of that already too. Like there are platforms now that do full stack stuff. Anyway, that's my take.
All right. Thank you, Greg. All right. I'm here with Ryan Freitas on day 2 of Config. How's your config been?
Great. Coming to config for me is a combination of getting a view of the current state of tools and what's coming, but also it's a high school reunion, it feels like, because there's so many people in the industry that are here at one time, all designers, a lot of here up in the leadership collective. It's a bunch of people who've been doing the same thing for as long as I have and longer, and getting a chance to kind of come together once a year.
Yeah, there is definitely that community aspect of it.
Last year, I was overwhelmed. This year's a little less overwhelming, but downstairs, it is insane how many young designers are here, and just the size of the thing.
So downstairs is extremely overwhelming. Being in that big room with
with that many people it's a lot.
Tens of thousands of designers is insane.
The idea that we would have an event for tens of thousands of designers when we were coming up is a completely different idea.
Absolutely. What do you think about what they announced?
Well, given that we are big fans and friends with Figma at JPMorgan Chase, we were very excited by what they were announcing. Obviously, the focus on MCP and interop is a big deal for us. A lot of the conversation lately has been around, in our experiments, of all the different, there's no one canonical stack. So being able to access and encode and build skills and have them available throughout. So when they start talking about shipping to prod, we're a little less we're not there yet. We are a bank. We're federally regulated. We have all these security things in mind. And we've got engineers who will basically say, hang on a minute. We really need to run this through our process. Right. So we worry less about how close to the metal are you? That's something that I hear all the time. We are going to get to that place, but we are not there yet. So I'm excited about the stuff that allows me to tell my teams, you're going to have access to these tools. You're going to be able to use them anywhere, regardless of if you're using GitHub Copilot, if you're using Claude, if you're using any of the available things that are coming, if we're doing some homegrown stuff, it's all going to be available, which we're really excited about.
Yeah. Did you hear anything more about skills? That was the one thing I kind of got glossed over.
I think there's a reason it gets glossed over. It's because they don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. They want to be able to kind of get people excited about what they've got coming. I was lucky enough to have some time with Dylan yesterday. And I can't tell you anything about what that conversation was about,
Sure.
but we did talk about skills, and we're going to talk more. And it is something that is, I know that he and Yuki and others on the team were very excited about and very, very focused on.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. You have to remember also that this conference is effectively marketing. So they have to give big marketing messages, and it's going to be digested as public information that affects their now public stock, right? They have to address the things that analysts and other people have been saying. Wait, are you paying attention to the enterprise? Are you, what audience are you chasing? How are you going to compete with other established players? So the message that we get at Config is not always the totality of what they've got in mind.
Right. Talking to other people, that's been a question of like, who do they have in mind? Because it seemed like enterprise got the short shift this year. It seemed UX got the short shift this year.
Are they caring more about marketers than they are about the individual product designers? We don't know. Here's what I can say is the biggest trap that any tool can evolve towards is not having a point of view on who its core is. Like who uses it day in, day out as their bread and butter tool, their go-to. What we're finding, at least in our experimentation with the tools, is last mile, you've got to open up the tools. You cannot prompt your way towards a 4-pixel move, or that's got to come down 20 dips. Nope. It's got to be done manually. And what we just need to preserve is the baseline of functionality. Okay, cool. You got that? Great. Now juice it. How is MCP working? How are skills being integrated? How close can we get this into the production? Are we stopping at proto, or are we actually evolving beyond that? I know you're comfortable in IDE. I got a lot of designers who aren't. Right? So where are we meeting halfway? What are the dangers of everyone becoming a solo player instead of a collaborator?
Mhm.
Siloing is actually really scary to me because the best work I've done in my career has been as group.
Right. Well, it seems like they're definitely continue to lean into that.
Okay.
That seems to be, that's what Figma was built on, right?
Absolutely.
Is that collaborative space.
And a
They're
browser.
saying the canvas is your collaborative space.
Which I love. And I think that we are seeing the obvious maturation of both the tool and the company happening in real time, right? Like we are seeing them taking seriously the feedback that they've gotten, the nudges they get from the market, the nudges they get from clients. We happen to be one of them. And for a bank, we're a pretty large design team. So like we give them inputs, they give us feedback. We talk to them about what we're seeing. They tell us what they're seeing. It's amazing.
Yeah, they've been a very responsive
Agreed.
company for sure.
Absolutely. I have zero knowledge of what their market strategy is.
Right.
But if I were sitting on a couch with you when we were talking about what's the future look like, we would know that in order to gain market share, they're going to have to go after some of the incumbents in places where they have not been traditionally comfortable.
Right.
Or where we're a product design tool. Okay, but can you do more? Can you extend? You go back to our like startup days, like it's the thought that like, okay, well, we focus on this one core, but there are adjacencies.
Right. That's what I think that they are just taking swings at, it seems like Canva
Absolutely.
and Adobe and things that are like on the edge of what I would consider product design.
And 20 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, we would have embraced that to say, like, wouldn't it be awesome if you could empower via one tool, if it was clean, if it wasn't a mess, if it wasn't a junk drawer filled with stuff, it was well organized, good taxonomy, good nav, ready access to the kinds of things that like, I'm a solo player inside of a small organization, and I've got to produce both marketing materials, and I've got to build the website, and I'm going to automate this as much as possible, and I'm going to use like as many agents as I can lay my hands on, and I've got tokens for. Like, if they empower the smaller designers who have to wear a lot of hats, we've been talking a lot about what the future looks like and who's going to be okay, and maybe who's got a little bit of a threat or anxiety at them right now. I think the kids are going to be all right, honestly. I honestly think that anyone who's day-to-day using the tools is going to be just fine.
All right, well, that's a good place to end.
Great.
Ryan, thanks for talking with us.
Thanks, Sam. Great to see you.
Hello, we're here again, day 2 on Config. I'm here with Kim Lennox. Kim, how's your config been?
I love catching up with everybody. 3 years in, that seems to be the biggest thing for me is seeing all the people that I used to work with and just catching up with friends.
What was the biggest thing that you've heard or the buzz?
I think that people seem to be accepting the chaos now. And I feel like maybe last year or maybe 6 months ago, I feel like a lot of people were in this panic. Design was dead and what are we going to do? And
Somebody here does have a design is dead hat, I saw.
oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that people are just more accepting. We've got to adapt and we're going to make it work. And they're getting in the weeds and figuring it out. And especially with the leadership, what I'm seeing is they're digging in deep. And every single design leader that I've talked to is leading by example, doing the design work themselves. They might not have been in the tools for years, and they're in the tools now.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing where people are like, I never really even used Figma before or
Right.
used any of these tools, and now I'm using it to make quick prototypes.
Yep.
And I pass those off to my team or to the execs, and then my team refines them. So
Exactly.
that is an interesting change.
I'm also seeing still a huge contraction of design teams, and that seems to be having a underlining fear of, are we next? And then the design leaders that have been through it for a while are just like, this is par for the course. I've got another round of layoffs with this team, and or maybe in the course of the last 5 years, they've gone through 3 or 4 different layoffs at a couple different companies. And there's a course correction that has to happen. And the thing that I wonder how this is going to pan out, how many folks that are now looking for work that have design experience are going to be able to get the jobs in design? Or do they need to evolve into some other role?
I've definitely heard people not here, but elsewhere talk about how they're moving more into like more PM roles.
Yeah.
Like that are getting basically out of design because it's morphed so much that what they used to do is not what they do.
Right.
And so that's an interesting that's an interesting thing. But
And-
also, I mean, the design role is also like splittering and changing too. There's a lot of new flavors, I think,
Yeah.
of design.
Well, I think about during the dot-com boom, we all wore different hats and we were just trying to solve problems. We were just trying to ship stuff that people would use. And we didn't have clearly defined roles. We didn't have degrees in interaction design or any of those things. And we're back to that. I feel like in the last 15 years, design leadership created career ladders and architectures and ways of being. You knew that you were a content designer or you were a UX designer or you were a product. There was all these different specific roles. Those all go away. And right now, it's just what's the problem that you need to solve for your business? And you can code it, you can design it, you can do whatever you want. And you don't have to be just designer. You can be an engineer. Anybody can create this. And that feels very dot-com boom to me of anybody can do anything. And that's exciting.
Right. I was talking to Jesse James Garrett a little earlier and saying that the period of stability of roles was actually a pretty short time period. There's been more periods in design where things have been unstable and less defined and
Yeah.
more everyone kind of does everything. And we had this kind of mindset that was like, over the last, for 10 years, things were kind of stable and now they weren't. But most of design was never that way.
It's always had some version of chaos, some version of unknown, some lack of career architecture. And that was okay. Because if you were solving interesting problems, it doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter where you fit into the org as long as you're building interesting things.
As long as there is a role, whatever it's called,
Ye-
I think what people fear is that there are just fewer roles, period.
I do think there's going to be fewer roles, 100%. There is not a need for big teams. Just hands down, we don't need big teams anymore.
It's funny because I know some people here have told me they're like, well, because I'm like, oh, what's this who's Figma Motion for? Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, we have a specialist on our team that's all they do is motion. And I'm like, wow, okay. That's incredible to me that you have that luxury. I think that is a luxury.
Well, but the skill set that a motion designer has, I don't think can be right now translated into AI. That role isn't yet commoditized
Mm-hmm. Right.
at the quality that motion graphics needs to be done.
Right.
And so I think they're safe for a little while.
There are definitely some skills like that, yes, that are very hard to replicate because so much of it is feel.
Yeah.
right?
It's the taste, it's the craft. And so advice to people that want to stay in it, hone your craft. Have a opinion and have an aesthetic that you care about and that you can defend. And you also have to have, I think, more visual design. For those of us that came up through the systems design, we need to have opinions about the aesthetics in ways that we used to just rely on our visual design team or the design system. You can feed a design system into any of these tools, and it's not necessarily going to make it what you want. It's not going to follow the design system.
Some people have that part of it down to a science. Yeah, it's not quite there yet, although I don't know. Feels like that stuff is getting closer every day.
It is. It is. I agree.
I've heard the word curiosity mentioned
A lot.
many times
Yes.
in the last 48 hours.
That goes to the craft, the taste, the curiosity, the ability to discern, not just assume that what any of these tools produce is 100% accurate. You've got to come in and solve the problems. The curiosity piece, though, to me is if you show up and follow a predictable pattern, you're not going to be innovating. And so coming to a problem with curiosity helps you solve that problem. And so to me, the curiosity, I think, is definitely key.
And now there's so many different ways that you can solve a problem or create your own tools to solve the problems. I mean, to me, that's what's been amazing is like,
Yeah.
well, okay, I'm going to make my own plugin. Wow. Okay.
That's because you're curious.
Right.
You're taking that, I want to solve this through, I'll create my own plugin. And if you just say it doesn't exist or this tool that I'm using is hard to use, and you don't bring your curiosity to evolving it and fixing it and improving it, then you're not going to get the results that you want.
Right. All right, Kim. Thanks for chatting with us here at
Thank-
AI and Design Pod.
Thanks, Dan.
So we're here at the afternoon of day 2 of Config, and we're here with Alice Quan of GoFundMe. How's your config been?
It's been going great. I always love being in the space because so much about the event is about community. It's a great opportunity to connect with folks that I've not seen in a long time. And it's certainly not a surprise. Lots of talk about AI. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting. I think it's been a really interesting balance of both humanity and technology, which I
Okay.
think has been really interesting.
What have you seen that's had that balance?
Since I have my notebook here and I have all my notes, I'll give you some of my hot quotes.
Okay.
Teo Connor talked about AI is like junk food. It seems great in the moment. And then you look back and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have eaten that. And I thought that was really interesting. Another one that I really liked was from Hector. He and I used to work together at Google. He's now at Amazon. And he did an entire talk about a new design philosophy that he's been evangelizing called humorphism. And this idea of the fact that so much of the industry is designing for the tools, but not designing for humans. And so he gave a really, really interesting analogy around when you walk up to someone in a cubicle and you peek your head over the cubicle because you want to connect with someone. And if you make eye contact, all of a sudden, two people stand up and start having a conversation, and that barrier that was there between the cubicle disappears. And he shared an animation of an interface and said, why aren't we designing interfaces to be more collaborative like it is with real human beings? So anyways, I really enjoyed his talk. I was at an event last night at Instagram, and Soleo and Jessica Heesh.
Apparently, yeah, was the hot ticket.
Oh my gosh. I walked in and John Maeda was just standing right there in the front door. I had a really exciting conversation with him, and the panel was fantastic. But I have to throw this quote out there because Jessica Heesh is she's just hilarious and such a force. But she used the term prompt daddy. And I was like, okay, I love that. I want to steal that.
That's great.
And I share that because it's interesting. We as designers are so visual. And again, there's many types of designers, right? Not just visual design or interaction design. There's content design, there's UX engineering. But what I thought is interesting with AI is so much of it is about the prompt. And I think as it's become more multimodal, it's working better for me. But when it first started out, I was like, golly, I don't have the words for this, but I have a visual or I have something in my head that I want to dictate. And so I think as things have gotten more multimodal, I feel like it's been much more of a good experience.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people. Designers aren't necessarily writers, right?
Yeah,
And how do you describe something that you just do innately, right? Or that you're like, oh,
exactly.
I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know how to do.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like a big theme I've been seeing at a lot of the talks is judgment and craft and design leaders as evaluators and deciding what is good or at least making the call on what is good. So I think that's been a general theme across many of the talks.
For sure. Any thoughts on what Figma launched?
I'm very much a believer in the blurring of lines between design and code. And ironically, I brought up John Maeda. I think he's a pioneer. He's the one that coined the term computational designer. And I was following his stuff in 1998 when he was tinkering around and making all this cool stuff, building and coding the very thing that was the artifact.
Right.
So
I mean,
he'd been doing it forever. So it's interesting because now it's like it's the new black. It's the thing. But again, he's a
right.
pioneer.
30 years later,
30
we
years
can all do
later,
it.
we can
Yeah.
all do it. It's now accessible to everyone, and we all have superpowers. Designers have AI augmentation in the coding realm, and I think coders and developers now they have AI augmentation to sketch and design, and so like all the lines are blurring. So code layers to me was really cool. Obviously, that was the first thing that they announced,
Yeah.
and
I want to see more of that.
I've already asked like, can we get access to that? Now I
Right.
want to play around
Right.
with
We
it.
want to get that now. Yeah.
Exactly. The idea of all of it being right on the canvas, that to me is really, really cool because everything has been very decentralized or compartmentalized, right? You have to go to this tool to do this and that tool to do that. And then you got to bring it all together. And now it's so much easier to do it all in one place.
One thing that I really thought was interesting was being able to see that like exploded view of the prototypes. That was one of my favorite things because
Yeah.
that's always been hard for me to be like, well, here's the prototype. And it's hard to comment on
Yeah.
pieces of it as it's moving.
Yeah.
And so being able to see all the error states and stuff like that, that was a piece I dug.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that they really thought through both what I call DIFM and DIY. Do it for me or do it yourself. If you want to go down the agentic route and prompt away, or if you want to go into the tools, I thought the generative plugins were cool.
Yeah.
Again, how do we scale ourselves? Like that's a big, another theme. How are we scaling ourselves? Because
Right.
just like the skills and the gems and the various things.
Yeah. Did you see anything more about the skills? I've been asking people because I know Dylan mentioned it. And then I was
Yeah.
like, I want more.
I haven't. I am actually very interested in digging into that a bit more myself. The motion, a lot of the things that are happening with Figma Weave seems to be quite groundbreaking.
I keep wondering who that's for.
Uh, we have a really amazing motion designer, visual designer on our team, and we wish we could clone him. And what's cool is he's been sending all these texts to my boss, and I'm like, oh my god, I just did this so much faster than I used to. And my boss was like, oh my god. So interestingly, like as I was sitting there, I was thinking, is this going to replace motion designers? And the answer is no. It's going to amplify. And already we're talking about, ooh, how could we have Matt create all these skills for himself so that again he can scale himself across our entire so that's what I've heard so far.
Right.
I am not an expert at motion design. I'm hoping with all the things that have been launched that I could fake it till I make it somehow.
I have heard people worry that they're like, oh my God, no, we've given motion design tools to everyone. Now
Yeah.
everything's going to be crazy.
If you do too much of anything, all emphasis is no emphasis. If you do too much of motion, everyone's going to be dizzy and nauseous.
Right.
So we also don't want to do that.
Right. All right. Well, great. Anything else you heard or was exciting?
Oh, and with my friend Hector's final quote, which is, let's make humans more human.
Okay. Well,
In the
agree to
age of
that.
AI, let's keep the center of humanity at our hearts.
Okay. All right. Alice, thank you so much for coming on the AI and Design Pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We are here at the end of config.
We did it.
We did it. What was your take? What was your config like?
Wow. It was big. Lots of people. I'd say that we were talking about that.
Oh, I should
yeah.
also say your name.
Hello. I'm Emily Campbell.
Well, there you go. You can say
I can say
your
my
own
name.
name. Yeah.
First takeaway was the level of the conversations, the level of the contents. It's very high level. Found that to be really interesting.
High level in terms of not getting into details.
Not getting into as many details. I see a lot of seeds being planted. I'll put it that way.
Uh-huh.
Some of the talks that have stood out in that way. There was one yesterday with a content designer from Anthropic, thinking about how, as content designers, we're building these harnesses, we're building the operating layer that produces the words, the content, the copy for the conversation that ultimately gets experienced by people. That was interesting. So a little bit of that. There's another one I didn't make it to today, but a bunch of people were sending me some photos around evals. That was interesting. I think that the next year of people kind of pulling at those threads of what does it mean to assess whether what we're doing is moving us in the direction we want it to go.
How do we get user researchers involved in things like evals?
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah.
that just makes sense now. Yeah.
I'm seeing also some bits and pieces of this, hey, we need this new vocabulary. We need a way to talk to these machines or instruct and guide these machines in a way that isn't simply go do this, hit send, and run my prompt. So we're not quite ready to talk about the specifics of what it looks like day to day. There's like this utility of what does this mean for me and my job and my role in my company that was missing. But I do think that for the people who were ready to start to explore at that slightly deeper layer, there's definitely some interesting seeds being planted. Also really interesting is that we're still kind of melding this like capital D design as a everything, everywhere. Is it art? Is it brand? Is it product? Is it now engineering? And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing yet, but it's definitely kind of, it's blurring at the edges and we're not really diving deep into what does that mean for this particular type of problem or this moment in the journey or the ecosystem.
Well, when the tool becomes design, which I think Figma really wants it to be, and now we're putting everything from motion design to product design to whatever the hell shaders are into the tool, is it too much? Is it everything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I go back and forth on this, and it's not specific to Figma. It's not specific to Cursor, and Codex is trying to be the everything tool now. I think our relationship to our tools is just changing for any number of reasons we could talk about. But what I'm seeing is of the people who are here, some of the conversations I'm having is with people who sort of have a really strong grasp of their own fundamentals, what they need out of their tools and how they want to leverage it. And all of a sudden I have access to all of these things and I need my tools to connect my thinking across multiple touch points or connect my context. And I want to be able to be the owner and operator. And I think in that way, something this big and large can be useful, or at least I know what parts are useful to me. And then on the other extreme, you have people who are sort of consuming design, the role of being a designer. It's very much an identity, and they haven't quite figured out how they fit within that identity of themselves and their careers, or again, which part of it they feel most connected to or most motivated by, expert in. And I think it can be very overwhelming because now you have another thing to learn and my job becomes learning the tool and as opposed to doing the thing through the tool. And I do wonder how that's going to play out for the next generation.
Oh yeah. Shaping the tools is an interesting thing. And we've seen a lot of that here in the last few days, being able to make your own plugins. And so, I mean, when in the past have you been able to ever talk to your tool?
Yeah.
That's been like a fantasy or like mythology or that kind of thing in the past. And now like you can talk to Figma and have it make stuff for you or make things to help you make things.
Have you
That's
found
it.
yourself yelling at your tools yet?
I yell at Claude all the time
Time.
for ignoring my direct instructions.
Yeah.
I really am like, how many times do I have to tell you? This is like a 5-year-old.
how many times do I have to tell you not to use these words? Or how many times do I tell you that doesn't go with that?
Yeah.
All those things. Sure.
I'll tell you what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting to see what the machine is seeing. I'm waiting to be in this area of the tool or having it produce something else that I was working on yesterday and be able to say, well, where is this coming from? What are you anchoring on? What piece of my context or my ecosystem that you have access to? What are you pulling into? I want to be able to see what it sees. I think that is the thing that I'm missing from any of these creative tools is from that operational layer. Is it's still way too opaque. I can't control it. We now have these idea of like bringing your skills with you, bringing your connectors. I think we're starting to get into that and we're still so early. And the fact that we're putting all of this into production and centering our industry, our jobs, our roles, our identities around these things that we still haven't quite figured out even how to read and direct them can certainly be dangerous. But that's what I'm hoping for is when do we start to move to platform as opposed to product? Give me access to the data. Let me sort of operationalize it for myself, my team.
Right. Getting better access to both kind of that like middle layer, like the workbench layer that you kind of can get when you're working with the API, but not as often at the tool level.
Mhm.
I know some of my students last semester worked on things like showing when you prompt, what are the things that it's prioritizing based on your prompt?
Mm.
And you're able to say like, no, actually prioritize this, downplay that. So
Yeah.
stuff like that could potentially be really interesting.
Well, that's how we teach. It's how we manage. We observe. We're not always correcting. We come in, we observe, we let people see what we're seeing. We
Right.
create the vocabulary. We anchor it on well, this is the reference I was using. Maybe you're using a different reference, but are you doing it intentionally or are you doing it just arbitrarily? And I think it's that arbitrariness still that's embedded in all of these systems. That means no matter where you are in the journey, no matter how senior you are, or how experienced you are, or how curious you are, this is a word we were playing with a moment ago.
Right.
I can only be as curious as I can see. And I think that's missing right now from this layer.
Or that I feel comfortable in asking or know how to ask, right? That is another thing that has come up in conversations here. It's like, well, sometimes I forget that I can actually ask the tool how to help me to use the tool,
Mhm.
which is also something that we never were able to do. I'm like, I'm trying to do this thing. Please help me. I mean, you used to have to go to the help menu. And
Yeah, it's wild. I don't even
Yeah.
look at docs anymore. I say, go to the docs, tell me what they say, tell me how to figure this out. But it's
Right.
that last step of then don't just do it, but what did you see? What can I learn from sending you out on this loop? So at least I'm
Right.
a party in my own experience. I'm not just sort of circumstantial to it.
Yeah, I've almost put instructions in most of my things like only do this when I tell you it's okay to do it.
Hmm.
Because otherwise I feel like it's either not mine or I'm too concerned about it being wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this whole idea of a harness, my husband grew up on a horse farm and we've talked about that. He's a Luddite and I love it. It's so wonderful. I need it in my life. And we've talked about breaking a horse. And when you break a horse, you don't simply put a saddle on it. You have to study it. It has to break you. You have to learn it. And the relationship of a rider to their horse becomes very personal and very intimate because it's only from you being willing to be somewhat humble to this thing you can't fully control, but also earning its trust. Now, obviously, that's very different than working with a machine, but there's something about the ability to let go enough of your ego, to put enough data in, to try enough turns and enough cycles, to see how it works for you, how it doesn't work, but then ultimately have that agency and that autonomy to go, this is what I need, and this is how I want to conduct it. There is something interesting and harmonious about that melding I like to explore, but
Right.
you
Well,
have to be intentional.
Right. There was a movement a number of years ago to talk about literally the centaur thing of person and horse.
Yeah, we are
But
cyborgs.
exactly. But the fear is that we have become the horse and that now the AI is the controlling part, which I
Yeah.
think can happen.
I think there's just a need to be conscious and self-aware and we talk about like mindfulness and mindlessness and the more mindful we are about, well, why am I making this decision and why am I letting this machine do this thing for me, whether it's this AI thing or, telling me what parts of the algorithm to pay attention to. Who should I follow? Why should I care about this person's opinion? Why should I care about whether or not this person likes my opinion? I think we allow ourselves to become so mindless in our work, in our consumption right now. In order to make these tools work well, you have to be intentional. You have to be mindful about how you use them. We're going to hit a natural break. The question is what happens when we hit that wall? What are the business incentives and all of that? But I do think there's an interesting moment of like this empowerment and connecting them together and having your skills and your context. And now it's just having that curiosity to dip below the surface.
And I didn't hear any of this in any of the talks. One of the flaws of being at a tools conference is it's a tools conference. And so it is about working and using with your tools and less about considering the deeper implications of what happens when you use a tool or when you use it in this way. And I didn't hear a lot about that.
I feel like I saw seeds of it. I'm observing that the most valuable part of this conference is the conversations happening off stage or in the commons and in the coffee shops around. And there is definitely an energy of trying to make sense of it all and like let it be a tools conference, and you have sponsors and you have some of the topics. I was sort of confused on why they were here, but some of them were also really interesting. And like yesterday, the talk before the final panel was somebody who's doing motion design. And in order to build their Bezier curves, they would go out and actually record them physically doing the action that they wanted to model. And that connection between the physical and the digital and creating the vocabulary for yourself to be able to communicate to others. If I'm not just saying, oh, I'm going to make this bouncy, you're saying, here is the actual motion. And I think about like Pixar's rules for animation and
Right.
how why do I care about this little lamp that's just crushed the letter I? That's so sad that it's done that, and it's so cute. It's lifted its head. That sort of personification of these inanimate objects. There's something interesting about the way that you connect with that emotionally, and what does that look like to connect that into our work and to our craft? Like I think that was really substantive, and there was definitely some gems here that I think were available, but it's just the vastness and the moment of such ambiguity and trying to own the narrative. I think you're always going to get that at these large conferences.
Well, and I think this is a particular moment of uncertainty.
Oh yeah,
When I talked to Kim Lennox earlier, she was like, yeah, this conference seemed to be a lot about how to grapple with the chaos of the moment that we're in, although that wasn't necessarily addressed much on stage
Yeah.
because it was like, well, we're the answer to that chaos.
yeah.
But off stage, a lot of the conversations have been about how are we doing this? How are you doing this? Well, here's how we're doing this.
Yeah.
How are you doing this?
Well, and I'm not sure I want my tools to tell me how to navigate the unknown. To create the space to have those conversations is nice. But I do think that, it's anybody who thinks they have the answers right now is probably somewhere in between accurate and overconfident, which is fine.
Sure.
We've gone through these transformations before. What I'm noticing is that the places where people are meeting uncertainty right now has less to do with the tools. The tools are just sort of there, but it's what does this mean for our process? Or for the younger people, what does it mean for my value, my identity? Am I a designer or design engineer? Does it matter? Do I need to claim one or the other? And what if I want to be a brand designer? What if I want to be a content designer? Do I have to go build everything into agents? I do think that there's some pieces of this in the content, but particularly in the conversations offline of that there is essential value in craft, but we can't just kind of use the word, oh, I'm doing craft, I'm using taste. We have to name it. We have to name like, what does our craft look like as the world around us changes and as our material changes? And what are those immutable qualities or fundamentals? I hope that's where how many people are here right now? It's massive.
It's massive.
It's massive.
It's,
Yeah.
I think 20,000
It's-
maybe?
So thousands of people are going to leave this and go back to their respective companies and countries and communities. And I hope that enough of them come back with those questions of, well, what does this mean for me? And what do I do with this information? And what do I do with these tools? I think that'll be where hopefully the next year takes us. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. That's a good note to end on.
All right.
Emily, thanks for coming on AI and Design Pod.
Super fun. Thanks for having me. Oh, that was fun.
Thanks for listening to AI and Design. We'll be back next week with more new guests, more AI, more design, more of what you crave. Stay cool out there.